probably speaks for itself, but any commissioners have any questions?
I really don't have anything to add. If you have any questions, I could take them now, or we could hear from the folks from your service Delta. I think that might take a bit more time. They can give you kind of the background here. And if you have any other questions after that, I'd be happy to take them now.
Thank you. All right.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ben Humphrey. I'm the general manager of Gullwing Delta Airlines.
Welcome.
Thank you. About 2 years ago, a little under 2 years ago, I came from Gullwing, where I've been for the last 12 years, and I inherited part of my duties, disability handling here at the airport. And when I took over this, we had some problems, I would call it. We, through our own internal measurements, measuring ourselves against the 10 largest Delta cities around the country, we were generally number 9 or number 10 when it came to complaints per SSR, which is a special service request. So a special service request is basically declaring yourself as needing help with a wheelchair when you arrive here in Minneapolis, whether you're transferring or terminating or starting your trip here in Minneapolis. So number 9 or number 10, we have that history. And so as we dug into a lot of the data, we discovered some what I would call heat zones, areas where we could improve upon. And one of those happens to be in front of the airport where we check in. And working with Bill Work with the airport, we decided to consolidate one of the areas where we check in, where I check in, or excuse me, at door 5, and basically consolidate our resources there, assign it, et cetera, et cetera. And through that methodology, we improved our complaints in that area rate. As a matter of fact, I don't think we've had a complaint since we've done that. That was, I would say, the lowest of the low-hanging fruit. And we had some other, I guess, more difficult problems to address. Most notably, the vendor we were working with at the time, they were trying different things too, but they were trying things unsuccessfully, and we decided to put that contract out for bid. Through that process, we chose AirServe. We chose AirServe not because they were the cheapest, but because they had the best plan. They were utilizing technology, they had a good management practice, and they had a long history of doing well in other airports. And so the two main areas of focus that AirServe has in regards to disability handling is wheelchair pushers and cart service. With the old vendor, we started experimenting with the cart service. The reason we did that is because the complaints told us that not everybody was satisfied with our cart service. We had a lot of people that were very happy with it. We had compliment letters and things of that nature. And then we had other folks that said, I couldn't find a car, including my mother, who's also disabled. She told me when I took the above-link job that she'd like to see improvements. And so, listen to it. Yeah. So, one data point there, but other data points certainly suggest we had some room to grow. So, so we started experimenting with the old vendor on cart service. And you may remember our old cart service generally had a lot of point-to-point service, or what I would deem as like a taxi service. Somebody sees the cart, they flag them down, they ask to go to a gate, the cart makes a U-turn, they go to that gate. And that's why when you got that service, boy, you thought it was great. The problem is those carts were being flagged down kind of in the middle of the airport, but the extremes of the airport were being untouched. And so our complaints were gathered the number you had at the end of the seat. Waited for a long time for carts, et cetera, et cetera. So we started experimenting with a bus route system where we told the cart drivers essentially you're going to operate as a bus system rather than a taxi system. You need to stay on the route, and the only time you can deviate from that route is if your cart is full and you get the blessing from dispatch. And what that means sometimes is you pass somebody sitting in our blue chairs that wants to go this way, and the cart's traveling that way. And in those situations, we politely tell them that there'll be another cart probably within 3 minutes. And we did time studies, and our time studies said that anywhere from 2.5 to 2 minutes and 45 seconds on the average, you should see a cart going in the direction that you want to go. And so we retrained our cart drivers, we retrained our Delta agents to change the expectation from flag down the cart and have them take you from A to B to, if you walk right out there to the blue chair, you should see a cart within 2.5 to 3 minutes. Now, that timing is an average, so sometimes you might see 3 carts in a row go by, then you might have to wait 8 minutes. So looking forward to the future, we are working with the vendor right now to track these carts using GPS and RF. And eventually, as we dial that in, we'll be able to space these carts out a little bit better and even provide even better service. So, again, we started experimenting with that with the old vendor. And we did some radical things, like we said, no carts on the F concourse. Why did we do that? Because we wanted to shorten the route. We wanted more frequency with the same number of carts. And we also kind of wanted to gauge what the customer thought of maybe no carts. Maybe we don't have any carts, and we go wheelchair push all over the place. Well, we got feedback, all right. It wasn't the feedback we were looking for. People like carts, so that pretty much confirmed it. But what we did learn in that process is the idea of shortening the route is a good idea, and the remaining route has much higher frequency. So we have a halfway turnaround point on the F. A lot of the reason we do that is for congestion purposes on the end of the F. We don't go into D-pod anymore, and we don't go into the little pods along the way on the G. And so we can consolidate that route, use the same number of carts, and have higher frequency. As we were doing that, again, this still wasn't getting what we wanted. And again, we always look at our internal complaints per 100,000 SSRs, or special service requests. All right? And that was telling us, we still got a ways to go. We're having some issues with former vendor, and so we chose the new vendor. And in that language, with the new vendor, we added expectations, like 1-for-1 push. The old vendor sometimes would send 1 wheelchair pusher for 3 or 4 people that might need the service off of the airplane. Well, when you do that, you force yourself into grabbing 1 person off the airplane, taking them to a blue chair, have them wait for a cart, go get the next one, go get the next one. So we ask for 1-for-1 push, and then we also, on the customer service side, we ask our wheelchair pushers to give the customer options. And so when you get off of an airplane, in a perfect world, the wheelchair pusher should tell you your options, which may sound like something like this. I can take you to a cart. That's probably the quickest way to get you from A to B. But if you're unable to transfer yourself from the chair to the cart, we're happy to push you the whole way. So that is kind of the plan that we've been going with. And we staff carts and wheelchairs so that they're independently self-sufficient. But as you know, the airline industry is somewhat unpredictable in some cases. Sometimes we have peaks that we weren't expecting, and sometimes we have valleys that we weren't expecting. The expectation of the cart driver is to be cross-trained and handle wheelchairs. And I'm going to just turn it over to Mike at this point and kind of talk about the training process and how sometimes we have to take the cart driver, who is trained in both cart driving and wheelchair pushing, and have them do wheelchair pushes.
Thanks, Nick. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Michael Cox, and the Air Serv President of Operations here in Minneapolis. Thank you.
Starting to feel more and more comfortable up here every time. When Delta awarded Air Serv the contract, it was made very clear to us that the customer experience was the absolute most important thing that we were to focus on. We needed to make sure that we had individuals that liked to talk to the public, individuals that would provide the best customer service and help those passengers feel comfortable as they're either traveling through or beginning or ending the travel here in Minneapolis. The process that we used to start the contract was we went and we interviewed every single incumbent employee for the previous vendor. The goal was, number one, identify the folks that really did a good job, that knew the airport, understood the layout, and could provide the excellent customer service that we were looking for, but also provide uninterrupted service to Delta so that we didn't have this huge disruption as we worked through the transition. We knew that that would be very detrimental to the customers. The next thing that we did was identify the training program that would best facilitate them and help them and prepare them to be ready to take over the contract and be able to help the customer. So we took every single employee, didn't matter what position they were hired for, wheelchair pusher, electric cart driver, sky cap, didn't matter, and we put them through a pretty extensive training program. A few of those items that they had to work through and they had to attend a class: customer service, hearing conservation, back safety, passenger transfers, sling and slide board operations, emergency evacuation, fire safety, hazard awareness, accident reporting, bloodborne pathogens, to say a few. As every single employee went through that training, we then wrapped it up with customer service, soft skills. What do we need to do to make sure that we make these customers feel very comfortable? And then every single one of those employees signed the roster themselves, and we have a signature on the roster for training for every single employee that we've hired here in Minneapolis, that they have completed those courses. The reason we do that is because, as Ben alluded to earlier, we staff for the scheduled operation of the airline. Days like today, everything is off schedule. You know the flights are going to be late. You know the peaks and valleys are going to be different. And in order to maintain the customer service level that we need to be able to provide for Delta and for customers, we then ask our cart drivers, yes, you're on the bus route, and yes, we've asked you not to deviate from that bus route without talking to your manager in advance. But you also need to be in a position that, for the customer's experience, that you can get off your cart and you can assist somebody to get onto your cart, or you can park next to the gate, go and get the customer, help the customer come off the airplane, get on your cart, and then continue your route and take them to their destination. And we ask every single cart driver to do that when we get into days like today. There has been some resistance to that, as you heard in the meeting 2 weeks ago. But please keep in mind that that is done because we need to provide the customer service, not because we're trying to honor the position where they drive a car 8 hours a day. Once we get through with the training program, I think it's also important to talk about the communication that we have with the employees. We have shift briefings at the beginning and at the end of every shift. We have regular communication with our duty managers. Our duty managers don't have an office. Our duty managers and supervisors who manage the operation day to day, their office is the concourse. And they have the tools that they need and the face time to be in front of the employees to provide any assistance that they need to the employees, in addition to actually helping push the wheelchairs and assist electric carts. We also hold a series of town halls. In fact, we just finished up the 3rd series last week, so we've had a total of 8 town halls in the 6 months that we've been in operation in Minneapolis. That's in addition to when we have holiday meals and we bring in catering and we take care of the employees and spend some time with them when we're all here working in the operation. We've also hired our safety quality manager, which we talked about the last time I was here. Nick is on property. Nick has been working very diligently with the ramp operation and the cabin contract, and has spent the last week in the wheelchair operation with talking to wheelchair agents and electric car drivers and meeting them and making themselves available to them. I think it's important to talk then a little bit about the performance and how we really do a team.
Yeah, I'll add as well that I also partake in Air Service Town Halls. I also occasionally have my own meetings with car drivers in particular. I talk to people on a daily basis out there that are moving wheelchairs and driving carts, and we listen to their feedback. And as a result of some of their feedback, we changed the route on a couple of things, and we changed a couple of operational procedures as well. The 2 that come to mind are route, well, first of all, not going to the out-of-town course. That was pretty loud and clear, not only from the customer, but from the cart drivers themselves. For a while, we had a cart route that didn't go by checkpoint 6. We changed it as a result of the cart driver's feedback. And for a while, we weren't cutting across the GC connector, and through cart driver feedback, we put that into the route as well. So there's a pretty good history of open dialogue, feedback, and discussion where the frontline employees can give their opinion and listen. So I guess maybe at this point, I'd like to invite David Martin up from our headquarters office to say a few words.
Thank you. My name is David Martin. I'm the Program Manager for Disabilities for Delta. That's a position that I've held for 12 years. I'm the subject matter expert on the Air Carrier Access Act, and I'm also an auditor. In fact, in the last 3 weeks, I was here in Minneapolis doing an audit. And during that audit, I wanted to commend AirServe and Delta for the report that I've been able to file this last month in the fact that they've improved the service that we've seen. One of the things I am always constantly looking for, I've got a 32-page checklist that I'm operating from, and in that I'm looking for findings, observations, and concerns. And in the first year that I did this audit, I came away with 3 findings, about 7 concerns, and a boatload of observations. This last time, I actually walked away with no findings, which is a significant improvement. And part of the improvement was related to the way that they manage the the electric card service here in this airport. About 2 years ago, I did a time and motion study on the electric card service. It was somewhat chaotic, and the complaints that we were getting were from, like they had mentioned before, were coming from different parts of the airport. But the one thing that was really problematic for me was looking at this operation and saying, what option does a passenger with a disability have when they come through Minneapolis? And what we were seeing was they were being driven to electric card services. With the multiple disabilities that I see coming through this airport on a regular basis, it is critical that a customer has multiple options. And so what I sensed and what I actually showed as an observation in my audit this time was the fact that Delta was not only providing a great service by providing 2 options, but that the customers were actually being greeted by great technology that AirServe is using, but then even more importantly, that the Delta agents and the AirServe agents were actually communicating and closing gaps on things that we had seen in the past. So I'm very proud of the improvement that we've seen here in Minneapolis.
So before I go to results, I do want to mention too that Mel Mossek, one of the MSB Employees of the Year, works in our group, the CRO group, and she does a fantastic job, as you guys have seen, and a lot of her day is dealing with customer comments, some good, some bad. So we'd like to get the bad ones off her list. And anyway, she does a great job. Results. So I'm comparing the first quarter of 2013 to the first quarter of 2014. I chose this period of time because prior to the first quarter of 2014, there was still some complaints that were trickling in from the previous vendor. And it's really a good block of time that gives us some substantial numbers to take a look at. And as we go on, we'll continue to make these comparisons. And any one of you is welcome to have a look at these things. But just to give you an idea, again, we measure ourselves by the number of complaints per 100,000 SSRs. The number of SSRs is special service requests. That's saying I'm in California to Minneapolis. So it's a ratio, and that ratio went from 188 in the first quarter of 2013 to 75 in the first quarter of 2014, or a 60% reduction. So good news, we still got a ways to go. And that top 10 list that I told you about, where we were 9 and 10 in our internal rankings, we're better half now. We've been as high as second. So we're not fully there yet. We've got some work to do. Specific to cards, we reduced our card complaints in that same quarterly period by 50%. And the remaining card complaints that we've had in the first quarter have nothing to do with the bus route system versus taxi system. It has everything to do with, well, we can't take the card down to the A concourse. Or we can't take the card into the G1 area. So as far as the philosophy of bus route versus taxi, I think we've nailed it. And I think we've got new things to work on. As we grab this low-hanging fruit, we're going to go for the higher fruit. We've talked about some dispatching things we want to work on, and sky's the limit. Any questions?
Commissioner King, Commissioner Maple.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Mr. Cox probably mentioned this in his remarks, but I just want to call out 2 points of emphasis that were brought up. So even if you're reiterating, will help me to isolate them. There was an allegation about the lack of employee meetings. I heard you talk about town halls and various other things. Maybe you could reiterate that for me. And also, I think there was a question about training. That was the cross-training of either a wheelchair pusher to drive a cart or vice versa. And I think I heard you comment about the cross-training at the beginning, but could you maybe just elaborate on those 2 points for me?
Absolutely, pleased to do so. The communication, as Ben talks about, is very important because we can't achieve the results that we need to achieve if we're not giving consistent feedback to every employee group. The only way we can do that, we can hold a lot of town meetings, we can hold town halls, we can, shift briefings, we do that. But it's the most effective tool that we have is the fact that our supervisors and our duty managers are in the concourse. They are living the same experience as our employees, they're living the same experience as the passengers. And so that's when we're able to have immediate contact and reinforce what you're doing well, correct maybe what you're not doing well, but it's that consistent feedback on a daily basis with every employee that we have is what's key to our success. We have, our technology in place that we have looks like an iPad, it's a tablet, and you've probably seen the wheelchair agents carrying those around the airport. But that tablet that every single wheelchair agent has is specifically tied into our dispatch. And it goes right into our dispatch office and it taps right into the technology that we have. So every employee can look at that tablet and they can see their assignment. They can see they need to go to Golf 22. They can see that they need to pick up Mr. Smith. And Mr. Smith needs assistance in this disconnected flight. They have the ability on the whiteboard to actually go in and electronically select Mr. Smith's name and stand in the jet bridge and hold this whiteboard that says, Mr. Smith, we're waiting for you. Similar to what you see the limousines do downtown. So again, it's putting the tools and the technology into their hands. We have the ability to send messaging and communicate like a text messaging on those tablets if we need to talk to a customer, to an employee, give them feedback or ask them how they're doing. So it's a constant touching of the employee. The shift briefings is really the key as well, making sure that we have regular meetings that we can get updates and we can talk about, hey, this is what the day looks like, we're expecting rain, we're expecting, some irregular operations.
Is that shift, you do a shift briefing every shift?
Usually it's twice a day, and so sometimes it will pick up multiple shifts in one briefing. The town halls are more of a global view of how the company is doing and how are we doing in Delta. And so, as Ben knows, he attended last week, we talked about cart routes, we talked about the fact that we've made some changes and we now can go back to some checkpoints where originally we had eliminated that from the route. Because of the employee feedback, we now do the crossover down on G so that we can get customers from G to C quickly without having to go all the way through the mall and get back down the other side. Again, it's about the customer experience and how we can make that better for the customer. The town halls, we talked about our measurements in the Delta world about how are we doing on the customer satisfaction surveys and how are we doing in the breaking of the complaints of disability. And then we talked about how is the growth in Minneapolis. And, the last time all we had was talking about the fact that based on the great function of wheelchair agents, we were going to take on the cabin contract. Last week we were giving them an update on how the cabin contract that started and gone. So those are more global versus shift briefings which are based on. The training, every single employee goes through the exact same training. And for wheelchairs, bag caps, bag runners, they all go through all of the list of classes that I talked about. There is another series of classes that if you're going to be a cart driver that you go through that a wheelchair does not. And again, that's our internal safe driving course, and then it's the MAC driving course in order to be able to license to operate in the airport. but all electric car drivers and everybody else in the company go through the basic that I talked about, so that you know how to handle the customer to get them into a wheelchair. You know how to transfer them from the wheelchair to an electric car. You know how to get them on the plane and assist them on an aisle chair down the aisle into their seat if necessary. So it doesn't matter if you're a wheelchair user or a car driver, you go through that same training, and that's all in the law. The other thing that we do is in our dispatch area, we have what we call Airways. Airways is our internal TV messaging system, and it comes from corporate, and it's on the loop, and it will give you some fun facts of the day. It will give you some information about the company. It will give you stats about how we're doing as a company for all of our clients. And it also keeps flashing on this loop a series of exact same information that we teach in the training for passenger assistance and how you greet the customer, and you bend down to their eye level and greet them and say, hi, how can I help you? And remind them that you need to offer them stops at the restaurants or the restrooms as you're pushing them to connect the gate and to offer those up. All of that is in front of the employee as many times as they look at that when they clock in. It's installed right on the wall by the time clock, so you can't miss it, can't help them either. So I hope that answers your questions.
It does, I think so. The car drivers then are trained for both, and the wheelchair people are just trained for wheelchair.
That's correct.
Okay. And wouldn't be asking a wheelchair person to do something with a cart?
No, we would not. You have to be licensed. You have a separate safety course to go through as an electric car driver internally with AirServe. And then you have to sit through the MAX training course, and then you have to be licensed with the MAC and get a little carpenter badge. And so if you haven't been through all of that criteria in the training program, you cannot drive a car. But you can push it.
Got it. To answer the question, I'll just make one comment. Having spent a lot of time in the concourse, I think the employees that you have are very customer service friendly. I've witnessed a lot of very remarkable activities on their part for the passengers. So it seems to me that that's coming along well.
Thank you. We're very proud.
Mr. Rick.
I believe that both parties involved in this item that has been brought to the commission are sincere. I'm an observation here that meetings don't always produce communication and dialogue. And I'm wondering, just from what you've told me, that you may be relying on managers that are working, or whatever their title was, down in that concourse on a day-to-day basis, that if I were an employee and I voiced a concern to them, the employee might not consider that talking to the company. And that would, that might be a normal thing. And I'm not faulting anybody for that, but it looks like an issue. Are these meetings that you have at the end of shift and these town hall meetings, are they mandatory attendance?
No, sir. They're all voluntary.
Okay, and they're not paid to attend those?
They are paid.
They
They're
are
there. They show up. They can clock in, or they can attend and stay over at the beginning of their shift and stay on the clock.
Okay. And then a couple of three other questions, Chair. First, do you have, and you may have given this at a previous meeting, but at my age, I don't remember what I had for breakfast. What percent retention did you have when we Delta changed vendors from the previous vendor, the employees? Do you have that number?
I do. We interviewed 100% of the individuals that wanted to apply for a position with AirServe. We ultimately retained 82% of the current or the previous vendor's employees. And a good share of those are still employed today.
And you didn't reduce a number or add to it? It was the same number that the previous vendor had had?
Our ultimate staffing level was higher than what the previous vendor had. That's what you're asking.
Yeah, all right. And then I see here what's provided to us in staff about the requirement, and I was concerned about what regulations we might be violating or not violating. There was an allegation made that we were violating regulations here. The air carrier, it says, is required to keep initial and refresher employee records of the training that's going on. Did you inherit those then from the previous vendor, or does the airline keep those? Who keeps them, the vendor or the airline?
The vendor would retain their internal training records, so we would not have received
So
those.
when you took over, you had no idea about the status of training of the 82% of the people that you kept?
That's why we did 100% of our entire program.
So then you trained them from day one at that
Yes,
point?
we did.
And The other thing I wanted to ask was that the training requirements for new employees versus the one you have to do within 3 years, I mean, is it the same program? Do you cover the same items? You listed a number of things that you trained on. I'm assuming that came from the Department of Transportation regulation.
That is correct, yeah. All of our training is federally regulated, it is compliant, and in many cases exceeds the regulations, the federal regulations as is dictated to us by Delta.
So it's possible that an employee that would come here and say that they had not received training were within the 60-day window that they had, that you had or by regulation had to get them out, or do you train them before they hit the street?
No, sir, they have to be fully trained before we come to work.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Mata.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. It's very helpful to understand how Delta and AirServe are viewing the services that need to be provided. At the heart of the question, though, or the question for me anyway, and what's been discussed over the preceding months, is how does the world look to an employee of AirServe, and what vehicles do they have in order to express points of view or to ask questions and what have you. He spoke about a town hall meeting, and that's fine, and so some percentage of people that are will attend that to hear what you have to say, and some others may actually come and be outspoken enough to raise their hand and to speak. What other vehicles are available for someone, an employee, to say, I have a concern? I either have a concern about my training, I have a concern about the level of service that's being provided. Is there an HR function or somebody independent of line management that they can speak to about those concerns? And then secondly, if an employee has some concern that they feel that AirServe isn't directly addressing, is there a vehicle for them to speak to Delta directly about those concerns, particularly if it relates to customer service?
Well, to use the overused cliche, we truly do have an open door policy. Okay? So you don't have to attend a formal town hall or a shift briefing to get the information that you want. We have offices downstairs near F7. Those offices are staffed, many hours every day. There is an HR function and a recruiter function that can be very open and mostly supposed to have met those people and through their requiring curriculum and the training classes. We did augment our current staff with the safety and quality manager. He is the safety advocate. He reports to me, but ultimately he reports to the employee because that's what his job is, to be out there and working with them and helping them and building that reputation or the relationship with them. So they do have the ability to have to do a group setting in order to get their questions answered. But Ben is out there as much as we are. Ben is on the floor. His performance leads are on the floor. They all have been in this environment for a long, long time. 82% of my workers came from previous employers.